My name is Nadia Sood. I'm very happy today to be launching a new series called The View from the Roller Coaster, and delighted to have our first inaugural entrepreneur speaker with me today, Vineet Rai. I asked Vineet if he would agree to be interviewed because I consider him to be a maverick on many, many fronts. He's done things no one else has ever done. He's backed people no one else thought should be backed. He carved out a whole new discipline called impact investing before anyone knew what that meant, and did that from a very unusual position indeed. He's now in the fortunate or maybe unfortunate position of being the investor into a huge number of startups in India. He's recognized for the contribution he makes to the Indian startup ecosystem, the global startup ecosystem, as his work has taken him outside of India to Africa. I'm delighted to have him here, and we're going to talk about all the things an entrepreneur needs to know in these times that are so difficult. Welcome, Vineet.
Thank you, Nadia, for having me. And I will start with the namaskar, given that in the COVID times, nobody wants to do a handshake.
So Vineet, can you tell us a little bit about your story? I like to hear people's stories, and I know that entrepreneurs like to hear other entrepreneur stories. So tell us about the early days, how you got started, and what got you to where you are today. And I think where you are today, I forgot to mention, for the work you've done, you've been on the cover of Forbes India, you've been recognized all over the world, received lots of prizes, but I know at the beginning you had a humble start, and we'd love to hear about that and what got you to where you are today.
Yeah, well, I come from a classical middle class family. Fortunately or unfortunately, I'm a forester. I was trained to live in a forest. And right now I'm in a quarantine room, so living alone was not necessarily a new experience for me. But being a forester and then you get married, my wife didn't find the forest as enchanting. So I came out of the forest, looked for a job, didn't get any job calls for a long period of time. So took up a research job, and then was lucky enough to be invited to set up probably the first incubator for India in 1997. And I ran it for 4 years. It was a government incubator. My job was to convert innovations done by farmers into business. And at the end of it, I realized that ideas are dime a dozen, but if you want to bring about a real change, capital, which has huge ability to take risk, is probably the most important ingredient. And then talent, people who actually really can convert those ideas or help the person with the idea to build a business is equally important. Now, with this great idea, I quit my job. I was 29. My only problem was my largest pool of capital was $100. My entire life saving at that point of time was $100. Remember, I was in the forest, and then I actually joined a government job. So not that I used to get paid much. So it was actually, one can say, very stupid, or one can call me very brave. But I was too naive and too ignorant about how to live a life. And so when I jumped off, it was immediately after I resigned and stepped out, I realized what I have done is quite disastrous. Not for me so much, but for my family. Between the first 5 years were quite bad. I mean, I don't think so there were any month that passed without us thinking about how do you pay your house rent the next month. In 2009, I asked my wife, looking back, did you ever feel that we will actually be on the road? And amazingly, neither she nor I ever thought that we'll be on the road. So I think the strength of the whole discussion, what I would like to point out is my early days were more about not even thinking that the world is going to fall apart around us, which, as you can think today, when the whole world thinks the whole world is under lockdown, is a good thought process to have. Think that whatever you have, at the end of the day, are you alive? Until the time you are alive, you have an opportunity to change the world again.
Absolutely. So, you've been through a lot. Obviously, you set up your initiative in 1997. You lived through the 1998 recession, the 2011 financial crisis, SARS, which impacted really badly on Asian economies. So, And you've been under lockdown yourself before India imposed its just now 21-day lockdown. So suffice to say, I think you've lived through a lot, and you've lived through lots of stressful periods. What did you really learn about keeping a business afloat at that point in time, keeping a business healthy? What did you learn about cash flow management, the other really key critical factors of keeping a business going? And how did you keep yourself mentally fit? Because if you were not mentally fit, obviously that would have an impact on lots of people as well.
I think the first thing that I would like to say, so I think you forgot 2001 technology meltdown and
yes,
2010
right.
microfinance crisis, where I wrote off more than $100 million in one day. On 2018 October 2010, I wrote off more than $100 million in one single day. But I think the learnings from every incident that I have gone through is first and foremost, it is about survival. So really, how much wealth have you lost, how much wealth you have is completely inconsequential. The first thing I used to think about is, will we survive? Remember, the only thing that matters is, can you survive? And you have to come up with 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days. So you can come up with batches of 30 days, or you can come up with batches of 15 days. First question you need to ask is, do you have enough money, capital, etc., to survive 15 days, 30 days, 45 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days? I am, as I told you, I started with $100. So I always was a guy who was thinking about tomorrow. Day after was never my priority, because tomorrow was always a priority. This does not mean that I don't know how to plan long term, but it only tells you that even though I'm planning long term, I was extremely wary of what will happen tomorrow. So being worried about tomorrow is very important. And once you are worried about tomorrow, your mindset works onto a survival. Your survival instinct will kick in. And that actually helps you deal with these scenarios. So to any entrepreneur who's actually in this scenario, the first thing you should think about is liquidity. The second thing at the same time you should think about is, can you hold on to your team? Remember, entrepreneurship is, while it is a lone game, and you are a loner in this, but your team, the people around you, have actually high dependence on you. Their morale is linked to your morale. So if you appear negative, you are actually taking down a lot of people. And this is a self-reinforcing cycle. So once you get into a self-reinforcing negative cycle, it is difficult to come out for anyone, even if you have liquidity. So as an entrepreneur, you have to think about keeping your people around you safe and linked to you. Given this is a health pandemic, we need to really think about our folks. Keeping them safe and keeping them aligned to you is the most important thing. The third thing is, when you look at risks around you, you ask yourself, let's assume for a minute you have only 15-day cash. The first thing you should ask yourself is, how do you extend that 15 days to 30 days? Is it because you can request your employees, etc., to say, guys, we cannot pay you salaries because we need to retain that cash? Can you help? And then identify those who are actually in the worst position and have no chance of survival and pay them. It is possible you might be able to extend your running to 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. The second thing to do is go back and ask your employees, can you contribute? Because this is a building, this is an institution you are building yourself. But now you can actually co-opt those who you were employing to become your co-owners, especially if you have a short run. So you can again co-opt them and see how many of them have the confidence to actually contribute at this point of time. And these are some of the mechanisms one can use in a short runway to increase cash and therefore become long-term, at least survive the. See, we do not know whether the lockdown will last 20 days, 30 days, 50 days, 70 days, or 6 months. So therefore, the best you can do is to be alive. Like in India, we have 21-day lockdown. On the 22nd day, are you alive? That is the only criteria for survival. If it is going to last 6 months and you can't survive, don't bother about it today, because it's not happening. That is a thing that you should bother on 6 months, post 181st day is the day you should bother. It requires hell of a lot of confidence and a very positive mental outlook to not think about the 181st day when you know sure death awaits. my suggestion is always just look at by till when your system works and what is the shortest term to stay alive. Funnily, you will see that the world can change on the 188th day also. So you might still survive.
I think that's such a good perspective, Vineet, especially if you look so far ahead, you can become completely overwhelmed and think nothing is going to be possible for me to do. So keeping yourself positive is so important. What are you doing right now? You were on lockdown, self-imposed lockdown before the lockdown started. How are you keeping yourself positive? And you said, as you said, in a small room, how are you keeping your spirits up?
Well, funnily, for somebody like me who is actually running 7 funds, 70 investee companies, 7 companies of our own, 7,000 employees, I am almost on non-stop phone calls since morning till night. So unfortunately, I have not had a time to think about my own quarantine. It has been so exhaustive, and that I have not been having opportunity to even sleep properly. Having said that, I mean, you have to acknowledge there is stress and that you can feel the stress. You can feel the stress at the back of your neck. Best advice I can give is workout. Do a lot of workout during this time. Because if you are not going to let your body work during this period of time, especially if you're in a quarantine and you are facing so much of stress, that will reflect on your health sooner or later. So I spend a lot of time working out. Every moment I actually put my yoga mat and do some push-ups, do something. It's very crucial to actually get in good shape and give yourself enough oxygen, because the more you work out, you push a lot of oxygen. Oxygen actually then drives positive thought process in your mind. And the only thing that will keep us all alive is positivity.
Absolutely. You must be seeing certain opportunities today too, because the Chinese always say in a crisis, there's an opportunity, and there certainly is probably one of the biggest crises we've ever encountered for this generation. I like to think about my grandfather. He fought in the Second World War. He lost his leg. He used to play golf up until the age of 84 with a wooden leg, and he lived through the Depression. So he had never actually gone to school because at 3 he had to go to work. And he used to always tell me, you have to plan for the worst, but you have to hope for the best. And if I can hope for the best, then pretty much anyone can. And he exuded positivity even in the face of the most terrible situations. I think our generation, in a way, or the next generation down and the generation down after that, hasn't yet experienced those kind of things to that level of extreme stress. And it's some ways it's very difficult to cope. But there are also opportunities. So what are you seeing as the opportunities today, despite this crisis?
Yeah, see, whenever something like this happens, specifically, so I work with low-income population, poor people, and when you're working with low-income and poor people, what you see is a lot of stress, but you also recognize that the world, there are lots of other people who are concerned, especially people in rich countries, foundations, donors, development finance institutions, who are actually far more, and even the government for that matter, is far more cognizant of the challenges that the lower income strata people will face. Remember, the other thing is the pyramid is always fat at the bottom. So the negative is that we are dealing with people who have no money. The positive is because they don't have the money and because they are the largest in numbers, in a democratic system, they are actually very important as well. What you do in such situations is actually make the maximum amount of noise. That's what I'm doing. I've been fastest out of the rockers. We have reached out with our request to Reserve Bank of India governor. We have reached out to the Secretary of Department of Financial Services, Government of India. I've reached out to the Prime Minister. I have recorded messages. See, it doesn't matter whether the Prime Minister listens to me or not. That's not important. I have to actually take the opportunity and go there. Now, the opportunity can come in very different ways. For example, we are thinking of launching an Avishkar COVID-19 co-investment fund and going and reaching out to our LPs and saying, hey guys, here is a great opportunity to launch a fund that will allow us to create more value for you if we can help our good companies survive this. These companies need money. Can you guys move fast? Now, I can tell you I've been raising funds for 20 years now. making an institution move fast is a very difficult thing. In this crisis, everybody knows if you are not out with something by June, it's going to be difficult. So when you go out with a proposal, you actually get far more positive receipt. The second thing, this is the time when you go back and tell your investors, hey guys, what is more important that I can preserve your capital? Forget about the returns. Not that we are not looking to generate returns, but this is not the time to think about returns. And first time in my life, the investors are also saying, yeah, forget about returns. Life is important, and after that, companies need to be alive. So you can look at or create positivities when you are looking at these challenges. This is also the time when you can bring your team together. See, when you collectively go through a crisis as a team and you come out successfully on the other side, the bonding that you create and the small skirmishes that people have, ego clashes, etc., they just wither away. So you will create a much better team as you deal with these scenarios. There are many other things one can do. Some of them are opportunistic. You can acquire somebody else, somebody is struggling, etc. But that's a little vulturistic, so I'll not go into those areas. I'm just trying to stay on the positive side of the human thought process. But at the same time, even if those opportunities arise, and if you are, let's say, in a strong position, don't try to actually take every ounce of flesh from the other side. When you get into negotiations, my guess is after this pandemic, with 90 days of lockdown or 60 days of lockdown or 30 days of lockdown, people would have reflected quite a lot and might have realized making more money is probably not the only thing. As you can see outside today, you can see chirping birds. The world has suddenly realized that had we not been running like a mad person, life would have still been good. So I think I see a surge of humanity as part of this crisis, which will probably make life better for those who are actually in a vulnerable position. The pride that people used to take, that just because they used to manage large assets, most likely will come down as a lot of rich people are massively impacted by the crisis.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about this virus. It really is democratic. It doesn't care if you're rich or poor, black or white, woman, man, where you live.
Absolutely.
It's ruthless. And I agree with you completely. This is the time for kindness and empathy. You know, what we are trying to do right now, even though there's a full lockdown in India, is to make sure that small businesses still get a financial assessment, that they understand how they can progress, that we help them secure a loan if we can, that we help them secure the loan when the lockdown stops. So help, help, help is the name of the game. I completely agree. And I think those companies that really show and demonstrate their empathy, not only for their clients, but also for their partners, will certainly come out of this stronger, with stronger relationships, stronger teams. So completely agree with you on that. So I, you know, given your experience, I thought, you know, lots of times entrepreneurs get very top level advice, which in a way is nice, but in a way it's not that practical. So I like to get down into sector issues, because if you're in a certain sector, there are certain issues that affect you that don't affect other people. So I'd like to spend the last part of our interview time together really hearing from you some top tips for entrepreneurs in different sectors. I'll start with a broader question about how should entrepreneurs right now be dealing with their lenders if they have debt on their books, and be dealing with their investors. What should they be talking to them about? And how do they manage that difficult conversation that might be coming up that says, you know what, I don't actually have the cash right now to pay you back because I had to shut my business down completely?
I think this is probably the best time for any entrepreneur to talk to his lender. And I can tell you with great confidence, we are also lenders. So I actually know I'm an equity investor, but I'm also a lender. See, the most important thing is almost everybody recognizes that what is happening is unprecedented and has never happened in human history. 2.6 billion people locked down, which 1.3 coming from India alone, is just an unbelievable situation. I think all lenders are fairly aware that whether you like it or not, you are in a serious trouble at this point of time. In some sense, it actually therefore works in your favor. What you must not do is try to take advantage, because any lender at this point of situation, the worst thing that they would like to actually hear from an entrepreneur is to be seen as taking advantage of them because the world has gone through such a hellish change. Being transparent, being humble, being communicative. I think the one and the most important thing and the biggest mistake I have seen entrepreneurs make is they start going into a shell and not communicate. Running away is not going to solve your problem. Running to the lender is the right way to do. So first, reach out to the lender before the lender reach out to you. Tell them exactly how much cash you have, what are the challenges you see, and you will be surprised how easily the biggest and the most difficult question can actually get resolved. Because remember, the lender is also in a situation where they want to know what is going on. So the more you hide, the more confusion you create in their mind, and therefore put fear. Second thing is, if you're dealing with a lender and if you're a person who doesn't understand the risks, you need to go to the right level. So if you're dealing with a relationship manager who has no capacity to help you, you as an entrepreneur have the right obligation to go to this person who actually understands the challenges. Identifying the right level to target at this point of time is the most important thing. Being very conscious, telling your business plan, telling them what kind of a negative cycle you are going through and how big the hole is, and seeking their support during this time is the best you can do. Of course, the rest of the 50% has to be done by the lender. Coming up with a moratorium, coming up with a rescheduling, not classifying you as an NPA, convincing them that you will survive. And there the positivity will be needed. You have to find a way to survive. Lamenting and blaming the world and saying, I never expected or planned for it, is not going to help you. So you will have to keep coming up with good ideas of why you think you will survive and how you will do it, which I call quintessential entrepreneurial capabilities. An entrepreneur is not about taking risk alone. An entrepreneur is somebody who understands the limitations and delivers the best within the limitations. You have a limitation, you don't have money, you have to find the best, best solution to it. Either find money or convince the person with money to bail you out of this trouble.
And this goes back to your very astute point earlier about thinking forward 15 days and being able to articulate that to your lender. For example, I know that we don't know how long this thing is going to last. So I've already planned to get through the next 21 days by cutting my costs here, asking my employees to, delay getting paid, asking my suppliers to delay getting paid. Even that is a practical tip to how to talk right now without getting overwhelmed.
So if you walk to a lender and say, I have taken 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps, and these 5 steps have increased my survival rate chances from 10% to 95%. And by the way, you're just helping me with 5%. That's actually such a positive news for a lender who's already harassed with people telling and calling him. I think it's important to actually just go step by step, not really feeling overwhelmed by the challenge.
Yeah, I think that's such excellent advice, because I know lots of entrepreneurs out there are dreading calling their bank and having to tell them I can't pay this month, especially if they have been paying, because it's also very humiliating. You've built your whole life, Absolutely. Your whole reputation around being honest, trustworthy, able to deliver. Suddenly you can't. It's a very difficult conversation. So I think your tip on how to manage it in a very practical way is going to be so helpful for people. So turning to sectors then, globally, the hospitality and tourism sector has just been slammed in such a bad way. These guys, don't know when they're going to be able to open again. After they do open, they're probably thinking, we don't know if we're ever going to get back to the volumes of travel that we had or leisure that we had before. What advice do you have to give to the tourism and travel sector in this time of extreme crisis?
So I think the first thing I'll tell them that human beings have this great capability to forget what is happening. So if tomorrow, 30 days later, the crisis gets over, it will take 30 days for people to forget. So I think the tourism and travel industry is actually best positioned to encash from that forgetful habit of humanity, of what caused the crisis. It has happened every time. We have gone through world wars, which lasted 4 years, and yet people came back and started traveling. My guess is if I'm an entrepreneur who has a resort, the great thing is you have actually an asset. The fact that you have an asset, you can monetize or cash. The moment things open up, you will have people coming in, and therefore you will have cash flows going. That makes you a very bankable project. Even though it may actually be up and down, it may take time, but at least you are not somebody who doesn't have something That is, for example, you're not running a furnace, which is one shutdown will take 3 months to start again. So think from that perspective that you are in a business that can start overnight and just wait out the crisis and the fear that goes in. And trust me, human beings forget fear very quickly.
The restaurant sector, Vineet, has also just been slammed. People, even before the lockdown in the West, I know in India, were reducing their frequent visits to restaurants out of fear of getting exposed to the virus. Obviously, they're now all on lockdown, except for companies and businesses that were able to immediately shift over to a delivery service. I know from our colleagues, our SME colleagues that we help, that they've lost huge numbers of staff who have just gone home to their village because they can't sit around in Bombay or wherever they might be waiting around for an income. How are they going to recuperate, the small restaurateurs? What advice do you have for them?
See, we all have to first acknowledge that this is an unprecedented challenge. Some of us will not survive. That's also a fact. If I was actually in a situation where I think that I'll have very low chances of surviving, I will cut the losses as fast as I can and start working on, because that's also smart. It is also very entrepreneurial. You cannot just lament and do nothing. So either you actually prepare to survive, or you prepare to cut your losses as much as possible, as fast as you can. And if you are thinking about the second side of it, which is where you are actually not be able to survive, which is possible given the cash flow nature of the restaurants and the low liquidity that the entrepreneur sits on, you are better off actually taking, looking at the challenges and situations that exist right now, probably find a favorable way to exiting your problem. Remember, for an entrepreneur, the situation decides what decision you take. So if you're taking a decision that is also shutting down, it is a decision, and you have to take those decisions with a calm mind. You cannot cry and think that things will get resolved. Take those decisions. They are tough decisions, very difficult ones, but you cannot shy away from the reality.
Are there any other opportunities for restaurateurs who might be, for example, sitting on an asset that they actually own as a restaurant, to utilize that space in a clever way, or make the best out of the situation, even if it's not to provide the core service they were providing before?
Yeah, well, I think you can actually reach out, and this is actually something I would have done. I would have immediately reached out to, so right now in India, there is a movement going on for how do you feed people who are actually stuck in no man's land, given everything has been canceled. There are lots and lots of poor or low income population. I would launch something, if I have manpower, to feed people from the lower strata. And the moment you start doing something like this, you would actually come into the eye of the administration. You might start getting business. You might actually get money from societies, from other people. There are funds being launched. We are also, the whole venture capital community in India is talking about launching a fund. These are all these funds which will go in the aid. So they will effectively be aid for those. So if you can keep yourself going in some way or the other, there is dime a dozen opportunity. Imagine in Mumbai right now, millions of people actually do not know where to go, where to eat. If you open something up and say, hey guys, I will feed you, and I'll not feed you anything great. There's no chef, nothing, but I'll feed you just rice and dal, rice and lentils. I think you will be surprised how you will keep yourself in this thing, and probably discover that the world has will recognize and come out of its way in supporting you. So I would actually not forget, and again, coming from the lower strata, I believe there is a huge amount of service and positivity you can create both for yourself, because the more people you meet, the more people you serve, the more positivity you create for yourself, and also buy a huge amount of goodwill from the community. So tomorrow, if you open a new restaurant and you remind people that you were the one who actually maybe fed 100,000 people during the crisis, millions of people might walk into your restaurants just to acknowledge what you did.
Yeah, I think that's such an excellent way of looking at things. It's also an opportunity to shift your service or product offer to another strata, another customer segment who you might not have been thinking about before, but it might end up being your lifeblood at the end of the day.
Yes,
and doing a huge, making a huge social impact. So what could be better than that? So it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom for the restaurant owners of India. What about manufacturing sector? Some of them are going to do really well because they need to produce more masks, more gowns, more things that people need in terms of sanitary products, in terms of dry food goods. Others will be struggling because the sector of manufacturing that they're in is considered a not critical good, is closed down. They don't know, again, when things are going to pick back up. And some of them might have long lead times to getting their assembly lines back up and running. What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing that they can do is take lessons. There's no bigger manufacturing hub than China. And that China is actually back to 65% capacity from what I have heard. And if they can do it in 3 months' time and they're 100,000 times more impacted than what we were, I think the risks that they are carrying are short term. My personal strong belief is that India cannot afford a 6 months lockdown or 3 months lockdown. So the lockdown is not going to last beyond, let's say, 21st April or 15th April or 30th April. Because the kind of damage that has been discharged today into the economy is exceptional, and I don't think so we are in a position to do that. The other good advantage is India is moving into really hot summer. And one of the reasons could be that we are not near the 20-degree and below countries. We are actually a country that is moving towards 40 degrees centigrade. And if there is any correlation between some fleeting references that have come on coronavirus and the relationship with heat, India may actually come out reasonably well post the lockdown. And if that happens, then you will again get an opportunity to restart the manufacturing in a fairly short period of time. There will be pent-up demand and you will get business. I think there is significant amount of liquidity in the system at this point of time. The government has already come on record, talked about actually a package that is going to come out, and you must actually make sure that you understand what that package is, how is it positively going to impact you, and be in the queue and use the lockdown period to prepare all the paperwork that would be needed to get the best support that you can get for yourself and your people during the period. Remember, getting some kind of a support to your employees during this time might also be very, very helpful for you, which can come from the government.
This can be a time for preparation and not standing still, as you said.
Yep.
We are also trying to talk to every credit enabled customer and say, even though there's a lockdown, you're going to need financing. Get ready now. This is the time to get your paperwork in order, understand your position, make the best case. We'll help you do that. So sometimes having a pause is good. It gives you time to prepare for what's next down the line. I agree, manufacturing also, there's going to be some huge opportunities for companies that are able to, again, make their 15-day plan, their 30-day plan, and keep themselves going during this period. There are other huge sectors that are also impacted, FMCG, pharma. These are going to be high growth sectors right now. They might have the converse problem that everything goes really well during lockdown and then everything kind of slows down after lockdown and when things get back to normal. So that's a rather unusual situation to be in as an entrepreneur, to suddenly have so much growth and then potentially have so little afterwards. How do you think they should be preparing for this or steeling themselves for what could be the future for them?
Especially if you're a small-time guy in pharma, I think you will be qualified as an essential service, and therefore, if you're not in manufacturing, but if you're in distribution, or even if you're in manufacturing, most likely you might get some level of relaxation. So you may not be that affected. But if you're in FMCG and if you're probably in non-essentials, you may be impacted. My suggestion is, or my reflection is, this is a time to think through about what you have been doing, how you have been doing, and prepare for the opening up. It's not going to be far. I think we are already past 1 day, so there's only 20 days left. Count it like that. We are heading in the first day of 20 days, 19 days, 18 days, just count it reverse and you will realize it will go away quite fast. Enjoy your family. Reflect. You can bemoan and curse the coronavirus if you want to. But don't feel negative about this 21-day vacation. Think you have gone actually to Italy or France or whatever, and have had a good time. That's the only way I would suggest to think positively. I mean, there are 100 different ways, but the individual entrepreneurs could actually figure it out far better than I would. Acceptance is a very important way to solutioning. If you don't accept the problem, you will never think about a solution. We have to accept we are during an unprecedented time. And once you accept it, you would probably work out your way. Entrepreneurs do not need preaching. They need the desire to act.
Yeah, action and day to day, one day at a time. Those points are resonating very clearly, and I think that's the way to get through it. That break the problem down into small, manageable chunks, so that your brain and your heart don't get exhausted, and you can actually move. Vineet, this show is called "The View from the Roller Coaster: Real Entrepreneurs Telling Real Stories." So I'd love to hear from you what you think has been the biggest high. You know, where were you at the top of the roller coaster in your career, and what has been the biggest low? And I know that entrepreneurs will relate to that, because being an entrepreneur is like riding a roller coaster every day. You go up and then you go really far down.
Yeah, I think I'll share two instances, one very recent and one 10 years back. In 2010, I think I actually remember September 2010, I had raised $18.3 million in 2007, I think November, and 2007 June actually. And this $18.3 million were worth some $150 million in 2010. I used to think I was the smartest investor in the world. Very few people have delivered a 10x return in private equity in 2.5 years. And then on 18 October, I had to write off almost literally everything. So my $18.3 million became $22 million in one day from 150 or something. So I think we wrote off 130, 120 million or something, some number I don't remember. It was my fastest top and bottom, pretty much like a roller coaster. The other one was we had actually shortlisted. We had gone to raise $275 million in the market recently for one of our flagship companies. And we received $1 billion worth bids, reverse bids. We shortlisted 4 very large investors who were fighting with each other to get in. We went through a selection process. So we made people actually wait for our decisions. We took our time, etc. And just before the signing of the document, so literally signing of the document, the COVID-19 issue cropped up on 28th February. Actually, on the 8th of, I think 2nd of March or 8th of March, I don't exactly remember, 16th of March, yeah. And unfortunately, we have to put the deal on hold when it was about to be signed, a $275 million of capital raise, all agreed, everything done in the final stages. So life is, and this is actually as we speak. So, I mean, what can you do? You can only lament and feel bad about it, or you can laugh at yourself as to why did I not do it 3 months back? So for us, it's as simple as that. And both these instances have a gap of 10 years. Each one of them are quite extraordinary by the sheer size of the quantum that we are walking away from and the kind of risks we are walking into.
So you've definitely been on a roller coaster, and I'm hoping that it's going to be on the up from now. This has been The View from the Roller Coaster with Vineet Rai, entrepreneur extraordinaire. Thank you so much for sharing your views. I know lots of entrepreneurs everywhere in the world are going to really appreciate your candor, your honesty, and your positive thinking. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Stop.
Lovely.
Sorry, hold on. Okay. So Vineet, I can't stop the recording. I'm not technically adept enough. We'll edit this down into like a one video and then some shorter videos with the tips for the different sectors, which I think will be really nice. Thanks so much for making time. I loved your piece, by the way, on like being a contrarian investor, and I think that's awesome. And I know you've done that. You should be investing in us. We have tons of contrarian investors.
Have you raised money?
Yeah, we have. You know, we raised like $5 million into the company.
Yeah.
We're doing a raise right now. Yeah, you should come into the phase.
We will talk about it later.
I'm sending you the documents, man. You're a contrarian.
Yeah, okay. Take care.
Take care, Vineet. Bye.
Bye-bye.